So for the next 35 minutes, we've scheduled an open forum here. And what I would like to do with this time is we've discussed a lot over the past 2 days. And I'm sure a lot of questions haven't been answered or asked yet. And I want to just open it up so everybody gets a chance to do those. But we'll put one rule on this, where you can only ask one question yourself. That way nobody hogs the whole 35 minutes we have. So if you've heard something that hasn't been addressed, grab a mic, now's the chance, and we'll do this for the next 35 minutes. And it's not to me, it's to anybody in the room.
Just to follow up on where we just were and addressing people and making seasteading interesting to them, a low-hanging fruit that I think that there is out there are the community of people who already spend a lot of time at sea. Recently, I came across somebody who is a big sailor, and he's looking to do a yacht, and he wants to take a few years off and sail around the world. And I started talking about seasteading, and there are a large community of people who enjoy yachting around the world and whatnot. And these people are I think, already the pioneers and the group of people we really need to look at, because they already know what the sea is like. And in his case, he was looking for a country to be an expat from. I said, well, if you're looking at sailing back and forth from California to New Zealand, why don't you drop a couple buoys in a certain area and say, this is generally where I'm going to be at for the next few years. So send my mail there.
All right, not really a question, but more an expression of thanks. And the reason is I've been doing this for decades, many decades. In fact, in '79, when I worked in the U.S. Senate, I helped write the first OTEC bill. So I've been in it since then. Life is a series of roller coaster ups and downs. And what this gathering has done to me is it's reinforced that maybe I've been doing the right thing. It's been frustrating to get to this stage, but I hear all this this enthusiasm, and what seasteading has done is bring together a critical mass of people that can make the difference. And so what you're doing, I have to congratulate you, and at the same time indicate that whatever I represent, the various organizations would like to link with you and work together into the future. So thank you and good luck, and let's work together.
Mike?
One thing that the Seastead Institute...
I don't think your mic's on.
Oh, it's not. Once again, one thing the Seastead Institute could do a lot to help others is if we had sort of a hacker space for actually working on seasteading related projects, and also ephemeral to build things, and also could be sort of an incubator for local groups like the the LG Oasis group, for actually building equipment or hardware to try things out.
There were a lot of questions earlier. You've already had your turn, though.
Yeah. Nobody else is.
Somebody's got a question in here. I'm sure I watched all those questions go. Mike's or over to Mark.
Okay. Question for you.
Okay.
So it looks like you're getting this boat, and if that's really, really exciting. Do you have specific plans about where that boat is going to be kept, and beyond what you said yesterday, any more specific plans about what's going to be done with it?
Okay. Right now the boat's in Fort Pierce, Florida. 99% chance we're going to get it. I will say there's a 1% chance something could go wrong this month. I don't expect we will move the boat for the first 6 months while we do analysis on what we want to do with it. I envision two things with it. First, trying to do a proof of concept business on it, try to engage some entrepreneurs who want to test something on it. And the other would be some technological innovations on it, that we can get grants to test energy, test aquaculture off the side of it. So doing two things at once. We're going to partner with the Cal Maritime Academy to work with their professors and students to do these analysis. And we welcome the feedback from anybody in the community as we go forward with that process. I've never had a 275-foot ship before, so it's a little overwhelming, but I'm sure I can round up a team of experts and figure it out.
This question is for Patry and yourself and whoever thinks that they could best answer this question if they cannot. How do you all think that the international relations between the existing countries will change once seasteading takes hold? Because the relations that we have with those existing countries as a seastead, we can determine. But how do you all think that the relations between the existing countries will change?
This is for you, Patrick.
I mean, it's a tough question because we're trying to predict the unknown. I mean, I think that we can extrapolate some current trends, right? Like, there's a lot of issues that happen because it's unclear exactly what a country is. There's no agreed on definition, and the closest to an agreed on definition is that a country is something that other countries say is a country, but how many countries? So even if you agree on that definition, you still don't know, whether Taiwan is a country or not, for example. And seasteads are just gonna kind of increase that, right? I mean, maybe increase that to the point where it gets solved, because you're going to have such a wider variety of sizes and types and dense connectedness of countries that I think the concept of country is going to have to become more flexible. I mean, this is already happening, but seasteading is going to be a quantum change in the degree to which it's true, and so people are going to have to redefine from the Westphalian state to a kind of looser definition of these different power structures. But it's a hard question, right? What is the way that countries have interacted with each other in the 20th century was really different from how they interacted with each other in the 17th century, which was really different from the 3rd century. And those gaps were getting bigger and bigger as I went back, and which means smaller as I went forward for a reason, right? Change is accelerating, and so it's hard to say what the next generation of international relations will look like, but less international, I think.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm not sure how to question this, but just looking at bringing it from the abstract to the concrete, if we are the pioneers of a new frontier, how do we structure our equity partnership in what we produce or what we create or what we develop? And are we the people in this room who will be doing that? And as we move forward, how do we organize ourselves in order to take command of the resources that we intend to produce?
Can I answer that?
You can answer it.
This is also going to answer, I think, Mike's question as well. You're saying how do we, how do we get together and capitalize on this? And Mike is asking, where is this hacker space to get this started? I actually, completely separate from that, had been speaking with TechSpace, which is actually based here in San Francisco, and they have hack labs essentially all over the country. And I'm talking with them about setting one up in Orlando, which was completely separate because we've a project down there trying to get women more involved in engineering. That is a perfect way, and for us as a community here to start setting up local meetup groups for seasteading and trying to get people to say, let's get another ephemera going in, off the Treasure Coast of Florida or something like that, in between the Indian and Banana rivers and their outer islands, things like that. It's a great way to start getting these little bubbles going, get people passionate, get people involved, get an actual community of people going out there. Like at Seattle, I mean, there's a lot of people who live on their boats out there. Again, great places to get going and get a connection of people who already are living on the sea.
Something I wanted to ask Neil actually while he didn't get a chance to. How automated is your feed barge? Not really. Well, it is related seasteading?
The feed barge that we plan to use in the Villela Gamma is one that was actually built by University of New Hampshire. University of New Hampshire been working at this for perhaps 10 years, from about 1998 through to about 2008, and then Senator Gregg resigned, and their funding fell away. But they had 3 different remote control buoys out on the Isle of Shoals, 250 kilo, a 1 ton buoy, and then they had a 20 ton buoy out there that were all controlled by radio. So they were able to feed remotely with a fairly coarse level of control, I think, which is not really where you want to go. What we want to be able to do is monitor the fish by video camera through the 3G broadband. So you can tell when we're feeding fish when they start to move down away from the feed outlet. That's when you want to start to shut the feed off there, slow it down there. And that's critical, that the making sure that you don't overfeed is critical, both for environmental reasons, but you're out in 6,000 feet of water, but for economic reasons, because you pay good money for that feed and you don't want to overfeed. So that's the critical remote command and control element there.
I think you don't need centralized control for that. You can probably automate that. Anyway.
Yeah, people have been thinking about ways to automate that using the microphone detection of the sound of the fish feeding, and as that shifts, that you slow it down. But you're putting a lot of faith in automation. And one thing, the ocean is very humbling, and things break out there a lot, and you don't want to have something out there that when it does break, it becomes very expensive. You don't want to have it dumping all of your feed onto the bottom of the ocean. So some level of remote command and control is critical, but also when we envisage this moving forward to a commercial scale, you're going to have people out there, and this is where the connection is with seasteading. You're not going to do it all by robots because of, as I say, you need to have some level of human control. The La Paz operation, we envisage having a refitted shrimp trawler out there 24/7 on the farm site, 5 miles offshore, because, well, security, but also because things break and you need to have people there.
What kind of range are you looking for? Remote control distance range?
In Kona, it's going to, as I said, 6 miles offshore. In La Paz, we won't be going to the automation there in La Paz because it will be manned and it's less expensive labour, more readily accessible. But within cell phone range, essentially, you know, the one thing we learned from the beta test, one of the many things we learned from the beta test, is that pushing high data streams such as video at the resolution that you need, trying to push that through a Dolores satellite just doesn't work. And the wheels fall off. And so that's why we're dropping back to within cell phone range.
You're within 8 or 12 range too.
I'm a biologist and I didn't understand that acronym at all, but okay. I'm within 802.11 range as well.
That's 2.4 gigahertz.
Let me pass the mic to Britt up here.
This question is for everyone. Would anyone be interested in living in a community whose gender composition matched that of this event? And if not, does anyone have ideas for making the idea of seasteading more compelling to women?
We're on camera, right? It's like it's being recorded. All right, I have no ideas.
I was just thinking that a lot of the technology, particularly the lagoon work earlier, could apply to the small islands and developing states who are particularly victimized by climate change and rising ocean levels. So, to answer your question, if what you're doing at a seasteading lab in energy and food and so forth would benefit the small islands and developing states, why not invite some of them to be residents? Samoans, Polynesians, Micronesians, maybe even American Indian tribes? Thank you.
Britt, I'm glad you asked that question. Yeah. I haven't brought it up but once in the conversations here at this conference, but the settlement of any area requires the accommodation of the production of the next generation, or it doesn't happen, or it doesn't last, it's not sustainable. And so as we plan our industrial or agricultural enterprises, the men who will be, or the people who will be working on these or working in service of these enterprises will be attended by their families, and if we don't, and when we make provisions for that, we'll have a realistic chance of doing the settlement.
Can you pass the mic back to Tim?
Well, two things. First, I've noticed in developing countries, a lot of the entrepreneurs there are women. So if we were to focus our efforts on developing countries, that would help with the ratios. But what I think might be better for us is romanticizing the idea of seasteading. Somewhere like Hawaii, women love going to Hawaii. They love the sound of waves. They love beaches. They love tanning. They love palm trees.
And you hate engineering?
Exactly. And they love cruise ships. I've shown the Blue Seed concept vessel with the geodesic domes on top with the tropical gardens in there. I explained it would be like a tropical resort, and that's the best responses I've gotten to attract women to seasteads. Romanticize it.
Yeah, I just have to jump in on this one. In my mind, the distinction between seasteading versus some offshore commercial enterprise, whether it's offshore oil exploration or deep sea mining or whatever, the thing that to me distinguishes seasteading. The seastead community is intended ultimately to be a community of residents, not just a workplace to go and do your business, whether you're a male or a female. It's not a workplace. It's a place to go with your spouse and your kids and your dog. I'm not sure about the dog. But it's a place for families to go and live and do what families do. And if we reach the point where it really becomes a viable community, the gender mix will, I think, take care of itself.
Do you think that...
Actually, Britt, can we put that question back to you as one of the women in the room? What do you think we should do?
I have a really long answer to this question. I've thought a lot about it.
You've got 5 minutes.
I don't know that I need that long. Emphasizing the ways in which current governments disadvantage women, United States, pardon? They disadvantage everyone, but those who are least well served by existing governments have the most to gain from seasteading and the most to gain from new frontiers. And, and Patri and Brad have a paper, and they discuss how the movement westward and the western frontier in the United States opened up suffrage for women because the new states were willing to do basically anything to attract women. And so I think there's a lot of potential for attracting women to the movement by emphasizing that governments will be competing for you. And I guess that's one approach, but.
Lisa has an answer over here.
And it's actually Lissa.
Sorry, Lissa.
No problem. But if you want me to respond, that's when I turn my head. Alexis de Tocqueville said that the great strength of America was its mothers, which I thought was rather interesting. To your point, I have one random thought and then a question for the group. The random thought is, in the initial stages, this is going to be so expensive that the idea you will have anything but the wealthiest families on these seasteads, I find a remarkable idea, because that footage is not going to be as expensive as outer space, but it's going to be right up there. So unless they live like the gypsy sea folk who survived the great tsunami in Thailand, etc., unless they're willing to live at a pretty low level, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of families on seasteads for a while. Now, my question to the group, and I apologize if you've already addressed this, is last night I was grumbling because I went from here to the Peter Benchley Awards over at the California Academy of Sciences. Peter Benchley wrote Jaws, regarded as one of the great defenders of the ocean, despite the fact that he terrified us all of sharks. And there were 6...
He's atoning for that, right?
Well, he's dead, but...
but that's, anyway,
yeah.
That's why
his wife...
That's why there's an award after him. He was atoning for his Jaws.
And so they had a whole 6 awardees last night. And I am much struck, you know, next week is Capitol Hill Ocean Week. I am much struck by what happens when you try to talk about doing anything with the ocean. I didn't even get near Sylvia Earle last night. I thought, you know, enough for one day. So have you all discussed how the ocean community will fight tooth and nail without listening and mostly without thinking? Have you already addressed that to your satisfaction?
We started trying to do partnerships with people in the ocean community because, you know, I don't think it's a question that can be answered in isolation from that community, right? I think the solution is by finding friendly people and engaging with them and getting a better understanding of the opposition and how to speak to them and what terms resonate with them. You know, part of the idea of, I mean, there's a sense in which we very much want to engage everyone and a sense in which we don't. You know, on the one hand, we want to make the idea as broadly appealing as possible, cast as wide a net as we can, and we definitely don't want anyone to oppose us to the degree that they take actions to stop seasteading from happening. But the other part of the idea of seasteading is that it's, you know, inherently not a solution of having to convince everyone to see things your way. It's diversity is inherent in it, and tolerance of different points of views, and, you know, not, you know, being willing to end an argument with, okay, you believe that, I believe this, I'm gonna go do this thing, you know, you're welcome to believe what you want. And so, you know, that it's a difference in the mindset and approach to seasteading that came out of frustration with trying to do things within sort of our current broken entrenched systems. So, you know, part of our goal is that, you know, if the people that you're talking about are people who will send aircraft carriers and bombers after us, yeah, we need to talk to them and they need to listen. If the people are out there, people who will say, well, we're definitely not going to let you do that, you know, within 12 miles of the U.S., then we're like, okay, you know, or we think that you shouldn't do that. There's, you know, going to be millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people in the world who think that we shouldn't seastead, and, you know, that's okay. We don't need to convince everyone.
Did anyone talk about the London Convention and the London Protocol in the last 2 days? Okay, this is not an issue that you have yet run into. Seasteading may be localized enough that you guys can pull this off, but there is something called the London Convention, which is what happened when the world decided it did not want ocean iron fertilization. And OIF, as it's known, may or may not be a good idea, but there are people who are darn near homicidal on both sides of that topic. And so there's both the London Convention, which says if you're trying to put iron in the ocean to create any kind of bloom other than for research purposes, you're outlawed. And then there's the protocol, which countries have to sign on to. I don't think the US has. My guess is because you are starting small and you're doing what we are doing, which is get subgroups of the scientific community, talk to them, wrap their brains around this, so that the most logical opinion leaders don't come out and say, forget about it. It's still hard because there's always an opinion leader out there you didn't talk to or you're never going to convert. And so this is what we're dealing with. I don't know what you'll be dealing with, but I'm sure it'll be something.
Patrick has a question behind you, but real quickly, I'd just say that, you know, the future of the Institute is to, you know, be diplomatic and reach across and make friends. And, you know, that's why it's such a diverse group here today. And, you know, introduce me to your friends, we'll make friends with them.
You know, this is an issue I've wrestled with for a long time. A third of a century ago, I was a campus ecologist at the University of Hawaii, and I taught technology and society and environmental engineering courses like that. And then later on, I kind of became a developer because as a director of an institute, you're trying to promote solar energy and ocean energy and so forth. And I got to see both sides of the can. And it occurred to me, here is a problem, and it is a problem. And it is this. We all go through school, K to 12, and even through college, and we take science courses. Science courses are taught by biologists and people like that who tend to be anti-business almost and pro-preservation. And it carries through throughout life. If you go through NOAA and their officials, they're kind of all anti-development. They're all pro-keep the ocean as clean as you can. And anytime you begin to approach something like seasteading and what we propose to do in Hawaii with Pios, it's a challenge that can be met, but with some difficulty. And I would like to suggest it being done at least in two ways. One is that what we hope to do will take a century anyway. And therefore, the place to start is today at the K to 12 levels and somehow get a kind of appreciation or mentality or philosophy in teachers that there's more to life than just preserving planet Earth. We've done a poor job on land and air, and we can really screw up the ocean if we try. But that's why, as much as possible, in our pitch to the public, we promote the part about enhancing the environment while we're developing it. And in the ocean, this is possible. In the short term, I've also suggested to the groups that I'm associated with, just in your first step of when you get started with something, bring on board a couple of safe environmentalists. And when I say safe, I mean with the right attitude. You know, they could be against what you're doing, that's okay. But if they have the right open-minded attitude, get them involved at stage one. If you try to keep them out of your boards and your advisory groups, you're going to be in trouble in the long term. So do it in two stages, get them involved now, but begin to improve some of the thinking that's going on through our educational system. And how you do that, good luck.
If nobody else does, then I can go. Joe's got something. All right, go for it, Chris.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, one? Yeah. That's to Katie.
On the attracting women issue, I would back up a lot, and I think first that we need to admit that men and women are different. This doesn't seem to be studied scientifically enough. I think there's disagreement among people and this attitude that it's a matter of opinion whether men and women are the same or different. So first of all, let's acknowledge that they're different, then let's study it and approach it scientifically and see what women are like and what they like. Research ready kind of way. Find out what they like. I mean, that would be down the road to find out what they like, but don't just say women are romantic and women like preservation.
I see a question in the back from Kurt.
But there are differences in the brain, and let's just approach it scientifically. You might get more insight that way.
I'm sorry, we weren't listening. What was that?
It seems that one of the assumptions we're making is that seasteads are going to be outside of the jurisdiction of nations, and that's one of the obvious long-term goals. But as a short-term step, I think that it's worth discussing whether or not you should put a seastead within that 12-mile range, because it's just a way of extending coastal property, right? And then it's easier to convince people that seasteading is a good idea because you're simply extending the shoreline, and you can still do a lot of the things that are essential to seasteading, like growing algae. You may not be able to do things like what Blue Seat's doing or the medical tourism, but I mean a lot of the controversial things that you might want to accomplish with seasteading aren't initially feasible, without or outside of that 12-mile range anyway. Blue seed is still feasible because it's kind of controversial within American politics, but if you tried to do something that was uncontroversially bad within American politics within that or just outside of that 12-mile range, you'd still get shut down probably, or at least you'd have to worry about it. So I think we should talk more about putting seasteads within that 12-mile range.
Could I make a follow-up comment on what Lissa and Patrick said earlier regarding seasteading not being only for the wealthy, and what Patrick said about getting K-12 involved? The George Lucas Educational Foundation, right up there in Marin County, follows American achievement in science, technology, and engineering, and math. And what you all are doing is a world of cutting-edge innovation in all of these fields. I would suggest offering scholarships or some other way which would create diversity in the community in order to encourage people to understand also that it is not just for the wealthy, that what you're doing is for the benefit of the larger world in advancing all of these disciplines. And maybe, even though it's not necessarily an American project, we will stop being at number 34 in the world out of 40 OECD countries and go back closer to the top 10. Thank you.
Just a quick comment on the seasteads within 12 miles. I mean, I think it's a good thing to do if you have the right business model. If you think about what are the competitive advantages of being on the ocean, it's probably either the regulatory environment or the nature of the ocean, and you don't have a different regulatory environment there within those 12 miles. So that whole set of business models goes away. And if it's the difference between the land and the ocean, you do have to ask, why isn't this already being done? And in some cases, there will be answers because the technology is new, because we've just figured it out, because I have the right team. And we've heard some of those ideas here, right? Algae and aquaculture that can be done, within 12 miles. So I think it's good if you have the right business model. And of course, there was the comment the lawyers made yesterday. Actually, there are some regulatory differences within 12 miles, and that's that California claims 3 miles, and the federal government claims 12. So you go 3 miles out, and you lose a whole lot of California regulation. So there might be something interesting to do there.
To clarify, you can do aquaculture or algae if you get a permit from NOAA. That's not always all that easy.
I just wanted to make a general comment more than a question. As I'm hearing everyone bring up questions or concerns, it seems to me that what the Seasteading Institute has done is opened up this door of a platform for communication, for science, for all these brilliant minds to come together to talk about what can be created and the possibilities. And like Patrick said, change takes time. Nothing's going to happen overnight. Right now, maybe there's not a large representation of women here, but this is a brand new concept. And I mean, I haven't even, up until a couple weeks ago, when I was invited to come out and photograph this, I knew very little about seasteading. And I think that as this idea starts to spread and people start realizing what is a potential possibility, I mean, everything I heard this weekend from all the ways that we're becoming more efficient at creating energy from the ocean, whether it's the thermal convections in the water or the wave movement, and with things that we can do with algae. And as technology gets better, I feel like these seasteads that are going to pop up, they're all going to pop up like blue seed with a specific focus in mind. And as those things start to develop, that's when our issues of dealing with who might be, who our adversaries might be and how to deal with those. And each one of these individual seasteads as they pop up are going to attract different people based on whatever their themes are and what they're doing. So, but in general, I wanted to just also make a general comment. I feel really honored to be here, surrounded with such brilliant people and visionaries for the future of humanity. So.
I think that's well, I was going to say it's a great segue, but since we haven't heard from you, Arthur, you can be our last comment in our open forum.
Well, thanks. A brief comment and then a question. My brief comment is just a suggestion to the marketing and development people in response to the question about women, and a modest suggestion for a slogan, which is seasteading needs women. But I wanted to follow up with a question that to sort of piggyback on Kurt's question and Patri's answer. What I'm wondering is, I see seasteading as an instance of this whole sort of competitive government movement. I haven't heard a whole lot of talk about that per se this weekend in terms of the connections. One thing I wondered is whether within the 12 miles we could be doing more to encourage potentially friendly countries like a Honduras that may not be willing to cede territory to a charter city or that sort of thing, but would be willing to relax a whole series, if not most of their regulations to a seasteading community. I wonder if that's a possibility.
Yeah, definitely, and I think it's a great idea because a lot of the resistance, you see this in the Honduran press and in previous examples, like where Paul Romer tried to work in Madagascar, is people have this very strong reaction against like other people taking our land, right? I call it the Avatar effect. Like you get so mad that you can like beat up their airplanes with your dinosaurs or whatever. Like, people are taking our land, and we do not want to trigger that. And I think it's a plausible way of maybe getting some aquatory and not triggering that, as if it's like, we're just asking you for permission to anchor. This was open water, open waves, we're going to promise not to pollute it, but you just let us anchor there. And a benefit of that over something like charter cities is that you can then later move, right? If you've gotten permission, gotten a treaty and anchor, then if they, especially if you choose a location like, say, the Mediterranean or the Caribbean, where there are many jurisdictions, you now have those countries competing for who's going to anchor next to them. And it doesn't just have to be within the 12 miles. So remember that 12 miles is for ships. If you're a permanently fixed platform, it's actually a 200-mile limit that you have to be out of to be in the high seas. So if you start thinking about the cost of being 200.1 miles out versus 12.1, it would actually be really desirable to cut that 200 down to 12, say, by getting a treaty. And in terms of precedent, if the country is just agreeing to let you sit in their EEZ, they're actually giving up much less than if they suspend their regulations within their sovereign territory. It's actually like a much less scary precedent for a country to just say, okay, there's this clause of the law of the sea that says that we can regulate economic activity, general economic activity within our zone on fixed structures. We're choosing not to regulate economic activity on this, versus Honduras had to change their constitution twice and still had, there's still a Supreme Court case pending about whether it's constitutional in order to do that. So I think a lot of good things could come from doing it that way. And, it's also engaging a country and having them be your supporter and invite you, as opposed to sort of, being like, we're the rebels and we're saying to the community of nations, like, want us or not, we're joining your club. So I think there's a ton of benefits.